usually we've had really good luck the past couple of years with the classes coming out and getting to see a horned lizard or a Texas tortoise. Today's not the day, and we won't see a snake, I promise you, okay? No snakes, no reptiles. Probably not, we're very lucky we see a reptile sunning on the pavement or sidewalk. But we should see a lot of birds, especially if it's not that windy. Birds should be good. And we're gonna see the battlefield of the prairie. But since, and we're also gonna do, we do living history the first Saturday of the month, so we're gonna go out there and watch them fire muskets, do musket demonstrations and cannon demonstrations out there today, this morning, before y'all leave. Y'all are here till noon? Y'all gonna have lunch or y'all just leave? Okay. All right. What do we, y'all know who I am?
You providing us?
Yes. Beans. One bean, I get one bean out of it. All right. So how many of y'all been here before, or how many haven't been here? Okay, so we are the only national park dedicated to preserving the initial battles of the U.S.-Mexican War and interpreting the war as a whole. So these are the main U.S.-Mexican War resources we have down here. Port Isabel was an important fishing village, or was a fishing village. Matamoros was an important port in the early part of the 19th century. I know I'm not going to go fast. We're going to go much longer than I said I was going to. But I got to give you the history here. I got to give you what y'all came here to learn, right? Matamoros was an important port city in the beginning of the 19th century. It serviced the industrial capital of northern Mexico, which was Monterrey. So it was on the line of New Orleans and Veracruz. It was that. And Port Isabel, I mean, Punta de Isabela, I think there's another word in there I'm forgetting, was an important place. It was a fishing village, but it was important because the Deepwater Channel was up there where the current jetties are out there on South Padre Island and Brownsville, Santa Ana Island. So the ocean-going vessels would come into the Deepwater Channel light and either send stuff on shallow craft to Port Isabel or send it up the mouth of the Rio Grande River, which a lot of you don't know. During the 19th century, we had big paddle boat industry coming in. People made fortunes. King Ranch, Kennedy, they were using the paddle boats going up to the river all the way up to Laredo. But okay. Yeah, so anyway, these are sites: Port Isabel, Palo Alto, Rosario de la Palma, Fort Brown, and Cantecitos up there. Cantecitos is on Military Highway. I'm not going to cover any archaeology. We did do archaeology in the 90s, more of a pedestrian survey. We didn't find any good evidence to support. We narrowed it down to 2 sites. We need to go back with metal detectors, but a lot of things have changed since the late 90s here, so it makes it a little more difficult. So, in the summer of 1845, the citizens of Texas voted to be annexed into the United States. President Polk guaranteed them the Rio Grande River as their southern boundary, is what Texas claimed. During the Spanish colonial period and the Mexican Republic period, the boundary of Texas has always been drawn at the Nueces River right here. Texas goes over here. This is Tamaulipas and Coahuila and all that, and of course, New Mexico, Santa Fe and all that. But the Texans claimed that, and President Polk guaranteed that would be their boundary, which that led to this war, because there's no way a Mexican president could keep his position and negotiate with the U.S. to release that much territory. If the United States would have just gone to this, it might have happened peacefully, but that was not the case. But what started here on these fields in Cameron County on the Rio Grande Delta would end with the U.S. Army occupying Mexico City for over 6 months, and then with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, Mexico would cede over half of its national territory to the United States, which, you know, would forever change the face of the North American continent and forge the relationship between these 2 young republics. And that might be the biggest history I get. So let's go down to the Battle of Palo Alto where we're at. This actually is a pretty good depiction. I'm glad it's kind of whited out in the back so you can't see the mountains that are in the picture. But aside from the mountains, this is a pretty good picture of what it looked like. As you see the other period lithographs, they're very stylized and there's just a lot. This is a pretty good. But what I like to show on here is this is a wide open prairie. And the period maps kind of show it too. Wide open prairie out there, surrounded by some brush up the north and that and on the south. And this is kind of how we have, this is on a modern topo. I didn't put any vegetation out here. We know the order of battle, thanks to, in archaeology, and historic archaeology is great because you have the historic record, which has a whole other layer of information really there. When you do prehistoric archaeology, you don't have it, you have codexes and different stuff, but it's really a lot more, there's a lot more information. With the historic record, you have a lot more information, but what happens with the historic record? What do they say about history?
It's written by the winner.
Yes, so it's very biased. And the historic record, I mean, even in the U.S. Army here, the different regiments of infantry, it seems like they're fighting a different battle, because each one's showing that we carried the battle, we took the heat of it, So even in the record, even within the same army, there's a lot of variance. I like to tell the kids, it's like when you and your sibling get in a fight and your parents separate you and they ask you to tell the story, you think they tell the same story? No, right? So that's the way it is. And then first-hand accounts, which a lot of people like to read, or like I part of these reenactor guys that live in history. A lot of them read the first-hand account and think that's the gospel. It's not. It's somebody's point of view. And when you tell your story, I know I do, always embellish it and make myself look really good and the hero and all that. But that's what happens when you're writing. If you're writing a journal and all that, you take it from your perspective, and everybody sees the world and perceives the world and the actions and the event differently based upon their perspective, right? So that's why the historic record is very important to historic archaeology. It's good, but I forgot the main part of this whole talk because I'm all disoriented because I've changed my plans. Archaeology studies the past, right? Y'all know what archaeology is? It's a subfield of anthropology. We study past human cultures by the material remains. The material remains is what's left behind. So structures, books, records, journals, what's in the ground, hearths, potholes, skeletons, that's what we study. So here on a battlefield, we study what was left behind out there, and it's using metal, because that's what survives from a battlefield. I like to say, the historic record, you gotta really try and get everything, take everything in, and kind of cipher it, because it's all over the place. But the archaeology helps you find the accuracy and the truth, because the artifacts or the archaeological record doesn't lie, because that's the way they were left. It definitely can be misinterpreted, and archaeologists do that all the time. But if you collect the data right and you do it objectively and you have it there, other people can come look at your raw data and come look at your data and try and, with new information, try and come to different results or find a truer picture. It's kind of like history. I don't want to say it's a moving target, but we refine our knowledge as we go on the past. I'm not going to make this real quick, I know. But that's okay, because we're here this beautiful day. This is just another sample of, all these maps are a little bit different, and they have different, like this feature right here. In the past, they have drawn the Battle of Archaeology all the way out to Loma Alta, which I think is maybe because of this map. There's this huge ridge line here, but that just makes no sense in any modern topographic map. Yeah, here's Loma Alta right there. This is the state site, the archaeological state site boundary. This is National Historic Landmark boundary, which Palo Alto became a National Historic Landmark in the 60s. And this is the 1992 legislative boundary for the park. And we definitely have the core battlefield that doesn't go any further east. But what they did find, and what archaeologists did find in the 70s, a lot of lead-sized musket balls out here, but that's from the soldiers at Fort Brown using this as an artillery range prior to World War I. Okay, you can't see this, but there are grid lines here. Okay. So we opened, I don't think that's gonna help, it just white it out. We opened the park in 2004, we were established in 92. We bought our first piece of land in 98, and we still don't own. When I made this map in like 2012, we didn't own anything over here. We now own a lot of property over here. But we opened the park in 2004. We had a single trail going out to the battlefield overlook, which we're gonna go out today. Right away, there was a push to add more trails, and because we're it's federal action, we have to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act and National Historic Preservation Act, which we do Section 106 compliance, which is what keeps archaeologists employed. If you're an archaeologist, you depend on the National Historic Preservation Act. But rather than letting the trails direct where we do archaeology, I wanted to, and I was fortunately able to convince our superintendent to let us do archaeology to decide where the trails go. We really didn't have money to do this. We didn't have the right project money, but we could do it in a partnership, in a group. And we took like 25,000 out of our base money. I partnered with the people at the Southeast Archeological Center, which is a park service where was my first permanent job, and the people from CRGIS help in Washington, because we worked the Battle of Chalmette. That's where we formed that partnership before, and so I just paid their travel, and we had the crew, and then we used volunteer metal detectors along with professional archaeologists running metal detectors to do the battlefield. So on a shoestring, we could start doing archaeology with the idea that we're going to apply for real project money, which we did, and we got finally in 2010. So you can't see it. So I divided the whole park up into a 200-meter grid. You'll see it later when they're colored in, and to start surveying. But this is what the ground looks like. You can't survey that. You have to prepare the ground. And we did it in a checkerboard fashion. Like I said, we were on a shoestring budget, so we're just trying to get the optimal amount of information we can with the money we have. And it looks like that, and it looks like this, where we have to do the archaeology. So we have to clear the vegetation. Thanks to partners like Fish and Wild, like I said, we operate on partnership, and it's gotten a lot more necessary over the years as our budgets have dwindled down here. And I rely on Fish and Wildlife a lot. They're good partners, but nothing we do is, how would you say, by ourselves here at the park, especially in resource management, at least in resource management. We rely on partners. I rely on partners a lot. Then we also rent our tractors, do our own mowing. We do have contract mowers. That's my former boss, retired archaeologist from the Southeast Archeological Center. He's the one responsible for me being a battlefield archaeologist. He took me to Shiloh National Battlefield, Chickamauga, Chattanooga. I got to work American Revolution battlefields of Gifford Courthouse, Kings Mountain. Kings Mountain was really cool, and Cowpens and all that. And the Battle of Chalmette, which was really cool. Unfortunately, I hope the fate of Chalmette. How many of you have been to Chalmette battlefield? Anybody? In New Orleans, about New Orleans.
I've been to Chalmette, but not the battlefield.
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, I hope that is not the fate of Palo Alto. It has been surrounded by industrial complex, aluminum factory. Yeah, it's just right here. We still have a lot of open space, integrity. This area is largely unchanged since 1846, and that's mainly because it's a coastal prairie. The soils are high in salinity, it's definitely not good for crop cultivation, although people have done it here, and it's impacted the archaeological record, and it's been marginal for livestock grazing, although they still do it to this day. But that's why it saved this battlefield. I don't know if I have a good slide to illustrate that. That was the other presentation I was going to give, but I can always give that another time. So we stake out these 200-meter grids, we clear the vegetation. The idea is to mow it. We got to get it down as close to the ground as possible to where you can swing your metal detector evenly, and then you walk systematically in transit, you comb. And the idea is we don't want to get every artifact. We just want to get a representative sample, and that's why we have to keep moving. And a lot of these guys, their tendency, the guys who are volunteers and just avocational, or I don't want to say the evil word collector or looter, but they tend to sit there and try and collect. I said, no, you got to keep moving, you got to keep moving. But that's also a bridge. We try and bring them, explain why it's important to do it scientifically, what the information you get and how we share it. You publish reports and you share it with the public so everybody can know the information. It's more than just the artifact. And that's archaeology is not about the artifact. It is about the material cultures, but it's about the context and the information you get from the context, and that's why it's important to do it scientifically. I'm gonna jump all over the place today, okay? Y'all allow me to, right? All right. Fortunately, cactus can be a mess, but we're doing it out there. Every artifact we dig, we look for iron. A lot of battlefield guys don't look. We look for every artifact. Every hit is dug. We only collected period stuff, 19th century stuff. And what's good about this area, there hasn't been a lot of occupation, so we had a lot of just 19th century stuff, a little bit of prehistoric, and then the 20th century was mainly late 20th century. And what were they doing out here? Like I said, it's undeveloped. There were ranching cattle and all that. So what do we have? We have shotgun shells, 22 bullets, and a lot of beer cans. That's what we have out here in the 20th century. So that's all put in a general collection. We inventory, we label it by the quadrant, by the quad we did. And so that's, that's documented. And then every period piece, everything older, beginning of the 20th century, we collected singly. I might have got ahead myself on this. Okay. We have these bag taggers that are following around. These are archaeologists, professional archaeologists. A lot, working at SEAC were graduate students at Florida State University, and she was a graduate student. They go around, they have bags, they each have their own sheet of MDET. There's like 4 or 5 of them. So they have a letter, like their initials, A, and then MDET 34, or and they each get a running tab out there. And that way everything's individually collected. And then we have GPS locations. These guys go around. This, unfortunately, is the same guy. There's another guy, James, who's also with the CRGIS, but they just take such good pictures, I had to put them twice here. But they collect it, they get the information on the pad. They put a little pin flag in the ground, they write the number of the find, and then when they get the shot, they bend it over. And we leave it in the ground. And then every day at the end of the day, we go and we sort it by each person, because each bag tagger keeps all the artifacts. Then we come and we spread it out, and we check we create a field specimen log with all these combined, and then we look at the GPS records to see if we got everything. If there's any miss, we leave the flags in the ground so we can go back out the next day and pick up any flags that we didn't get. Because we're out there recovering. It's 200 meter by 200 meter, I think it comes out like 10 acres. So it's a 10-acre plot we're walking in. And at the beginning, we used to clear all the woody vegetation with that roller chopper. We couldn't get that. Sometimes we were just stuck with a tractor, depending on budget or the availability. Actually, that gyro tractor that would chop it up, that Fish and Wildlife used, in the last few years of the survey, they shipped it up to upstate, up in East Texas, and it never made it back down. So that was the problem with that. Okay, actually, you don't see a grade, but these are the grids. So those are the grids, and you see the numbers kind of jump around, and that's because every year we checkerboard it, so we get the most information covering the battlefield, and we eventually, so we did it 05, 06, 07 on our base budget, and then finally in 2010 we got real project money, and part of that base money, which you have to do, you have to have the artifacts conserved, especially the iron artifacts. The lead and the copper aren't bad, the brass artifacts are not that bad, but the iron artifacts, especially in this coastal environment, once you put them on the ground, the corrosion really accelerates. So you gotta send to a conservation lab. At the beginning, we'd send it to Texas A&M Marine Conservation Lab. In the following years, SEAC developed their own process for conserving out there. We started using them. But anyway, with this, I am confident we've covered systematically 100% of the core battlefield that we own. There's still more core battlefield here. But yeah, it drops off. Everything drops off once you get. This is the core battlefield right there, and the archaeology proves that. It doesn't go beyond. That way, when we do projects like the hike by trail, which we did the groundbreaking, I know it's not impacting the battlefield at all. We're doing that on our western boundary up there with a partnership with the city of Brownsville and the Rails to Trails Conservancy. And we have this nice database. We have a database which we can plug into GIS and get this. These are all the period artifacts. And I said the artifacts aren't important, it's their context. And the context show patterns and all that in the ground, in which you can see lines, especially on a battlefield. Like you have you have dropped, and then you have fired behind them, which really showed like where the battle lines were. It's really cool how it works out that way. Although I say that cool, these are people losing their lives in battle. So the drop balls, the unfired balls, somebody got killed, shot, they died, their cartridge box deteriorated, and the lead balls that's what's left. Everything deteriorates after 150 years or however long you take. You see that hawk? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Hey. So, with this electronic and all, modern technology is great, and the more advances, it only gets better and better for doing research. And that's why in archaeology, I'm going to say this: if the site is not in imminent danger, it's best left in the ground, it's best left undisturbed, because archaeology is a destructive science. When you dig, you tear it up, you destroy the content. That's why it's important to take meticulous notes, do it scientifically, and that way somebody else can look at the data too later on. But once you take it out of context, you can never put it back. And so that's why things are best looked at, especially technology, the way it's going, and we're just getting better. I don't know if y'all used to watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, and Data used to go out there. He could dig without ever moving dirt, looking at the archaeology. Oh, sorry. That's me. But it was cool, y'all. I used to enjoy that. But someday we might get there, is my point. Technology is growing. Someday we might be able to investigate an archaeological site without actually digging it. And actually at Fort Brown, I'll show you, we're going that way. But anyway, so with these databases, you can sort by class of artifacts, weight, all that. All sorts of neat stuff. I can't read what that says, what this class is. Anyway, I can't read that. It looks blurry to me. Anyway, those are different artifacts, two different sets of artifacts based on something. Okay? Here and also with the database and the archaeology, that we have pictures, so you can pull up an artifact in GIS, you can have it put on a point and see what that artifact is as you're going to try and make sense. This is a solid copper cannonball, a 4-pounder. In there, you heard a myth that spread, and I can't believe we still have it in our video, that the Mexican Army here in Palo Alto only fired copper cannonballs. That's just inaccurate. They had iron, and they also had, both armies had the access to the three main artillery ammunitions. Solid cannonball, spherical case, which is exploding cannonball, and canister shot. Archaeology proves that both armies had access to those three ammunitions. This is before conservation, after conservation. Just looks harder, but you can see the scale is also bigger.
So it was fixed?
Yeah, conserved. So we take it, they take off all the corrosion, you know, that they treat it. They do it usually in a bath with salt and electricity, running electricity, and it flakes off all the corrosion in it. And you get a solid surface, you get the hard metal. It happens a lot, like metal workers and all that with rust on ships. You know, they do different ways that, and then they coat it, they treat it and coat it to try and seal it to where it will not corrode. And that's for long-term storage, display, and research. That's the other one that was really gold. That first copper cannonball was conserved. This is copper was unconserved. But see, the corrosion on copper isn't as fast or as dangerous or how would you say, detrimental, degrading to the copper as it is to the iron. The iron gets really bad. We have some stuff that's in really bad shape. Okay, now I can read this. This is copper canister versus iron canister shot in there. And so you see the Mexican Army did, because the U.S. definitely was not firing any copper canister shot. And y'all know what copper canister is? Well, you know what canister shot is?
Yeah, great shot.
Grape shot, yeah, it's just like a tin can filled with balls, depending on the gauge of the gun. They had 4 pounds, 6 pounds. That's the weight. The weight of the solid cannonball is how they gauged the artillery back then. So depending on the size of the gun, the size of the balls in the canister shot, and essentially it turns the cannon into a shotgun. You know, the solid shots for far range, hard targets like forts, wagons, other artillery pieces. The spherical case is for a little closer range, exploding. They had at this time, they had a cotton fuse that looked like a stick of gum that was treated. You cut it for how many seconds you wanted to burn. You put it in the fuse plug, and then when the cannon was fired, when the explosion came at the back of the gun, and we can talk about this when we do the artillery demonstrations. The explosion, the fire would reach around the cannon, light the fuse, and then it explode. The idea was to explode in the air above and in front of your target, and then rain the shrapnel on the walls of the balls and the lead balls. The spherical case is a hollowed out cannonball with lead balls in it and gunpowder. So when it explodes, it's shrapnel on your target. And then the canister is just like making a shotgun shell. For close range, for artillery charges. And then you also have programs like Surfer. Like I said, you make patterns, you can see stuff to help you show lines and all that in there. This is distribution of copper and iron canister by weight, which is kind of just looking at a different, you tease it out to kind of see what you see in that. And then of course it's always the interpretive person behind it. You're using the data, so it's there, it's that, but it's what you're also seeing and how you're interpreting it. This is the way SEAC conserved. At A&M, this is a canister shot. At A&M, you know, when you put it in the bat and you get to the solid, all this is gone. So you don't have you have just like a little ball when it should be about that big. This is more precarious. You have to continue to treat it and be careful. It's not good. The other ball is solid, but it's not representative of what. That's why we went to this method, but it costs more money when you curate it for long-term curation because you continually have to maintain it and treat it. But you get a better idea of what the ball looks like. Y'all can see that good, right? With the big crevices in it and cracks. And this is Surfer, you know, just shows distribution. There's just many ways to tease out the patterns in the data and show you what you got, the spikes. I forgot what the distribution of copper canister by count. This has all been copper canister, I take it. Now this distribution of lead shot by count and weight. You see there's a hell of a lot of lead out there on the ground. Even though the infantry's in charge and didn't fire, there is a lot. There's lead balls in the canister and in the sprinkle case. This fire lead. So these are just some of the tools we use to kind of tease out the data. And another one, what's this? Unfired versus fired lead shot. And orange. I'm going to tell you something. This is my weight. This is what it looks like in reality. These are the cannonballs we found. And there's only 4 copper cannonballs out there. Why do you think that is?
It's expensive.
No.
Because they didn't shoot that many?
No. Because collectors have been out here and of course, you know, 1 cannonballs are easy to find if you're a novice. But a lot of the collectors don't hunt on iron. They don't want iron artifacts. They want the brass, or damn, a big copper gives you, it almost blows your ears off because you have headphones on, listening to the sound. They give you a really strong signal. So I say there's a lot of integrity to the archaeological record here, but it's been impacted. The archaeological record, there's voids in it, and it's mainly we should have more brass accoutrements and copper cannonballs, but we don't because we had a lot of people came out here. One of the landowners used to plow this up, and he complained that the cannonballs would tear up his blades, and so he let people come collect them, and so it's been hard hit out there. But there's still enough integrity to the archaeological record where we can see the lines of battle and that. That's one of the challenges. If it's impacted, it's not pristine, and most times in archaeology you do have a lot of disturbance and all that coming in, and things can throw you a loop, confuse you, and then like this, there should have been more of these out there on the ground, but that's what people want when they come out to collect.
What is it?
That's a brass insignia. It's on a leather pouch. It's for the Mexican 1st Regiment of Cavalry, for the Lancers. These are dimes. This is the 1841 seated Liberty dime. And the coin, not every coin is from the period, but a lot of them are earlier than that. We even found reales out here for the next army. These are the buttons. The standard U.S. button. That's the standard Mexican button. You'll see it when you go out to see the living history of the soldados out there. They had, this button. The Mexican Army is still very much in Napoleonic warfare strategy and dress. And those are the military buttons we found, which we would have had more, especially this area right here. Interesting. There's a lot of shot. It's heavy for that, but you see these lines. This was the plowed field, and a lot of people collected out there. So that's why a lot of the brass, but there's a lot of iron out there, a lot of lead too. And I guess some of the collectors too, you get so many lead shot. What do you want with a lead shot? You don't collect everything, you just collect what's cool to you. I always call this a stirrup when I know it's not a stirrup, it's a spur. U.S. Cavalry Dragoon, which they were called Dragoons at the time. And that's a mouthpiece of a bugle. What's kind of cool, we found out in the initial Mexican line, what's kind of cool, they're in the historic record, in the U.S. Army, they talk about targeting the Mexican man that was out there in the line. And we found that pretty much in the initial battle line. And then these are musket parts from the British Brown Bess musket, the ramrod guides, before and after conservation. That's, this battle is good for archaeologists. It's easier because one, the U.S. Army had 4-pound cannons. I mean, it had 6-pound cannons, and then we had those two 18-pound cannons that they brought up that weren't really used. And the Mexican Army had 4-pound cannons and 8-pound cannons. So the size of the shot, the artifacts are distinctly different. So you get to that, and then the U.S. Army infantry had American-made Springfield muskets that shot 65 caliber rounds, and the Mexican Army had British-made Brown Bess. Actually, they're made in India, but they're from the British Army that fired 71 caliber shot. So when you find that, you can tell the difference right away. We also did XRF, which stands for, it's a fluorescent thing. You're shooting a little instrument at these lead. We cleaned them up. We did our entire lead shot, and we were able to source. And because remember I talked about the American Army shooting this as an artillery range. Well, it definitely spilled over into our battlefield, even up here where we're at. And their artillery rounds, which I'm going to show you a nose to one, fired musket-sized lead balls out of there. So with this XRF, we're able to, it breaks it up by elements, source the lead, and separate the U.S. Army from the war, the Mexican Army from the war, and then the post 20th century U.S. lead out there in that. So just one more layer of information that helps us interpret the site and what we find. And okay, this was the road. This road that the Mexican Army was waiting for the U.S. to come down was the road that connected Matamoros, remember this said the very important port city, to the Port Isabel. It was the major road at the beginning of the 20th century. It got moved in 1853 to modern day Old Port Isabel Road. But every time, my buddy Chuck was saying, every time I said there's the historic roads in this grid that we're doing, we found a Civil War bullet out there. And that's just because there were Civil War soldiers coming around during Civil War, the 5 years of Civil War. There wasn't a lot of action down here, but there was a lot of presence. And a lot of conflict out there. But that's another story. Delita can tell you that. And the archaic point we found on the surface. You know, we're out there walking, looking at, we're archaeologists, we're used to walking down with our heads down. We're not depressed, we're just looking down. Is that what we do? So we found that was on the surface, which is odd. This wouldn't be deposited from the archaic period. It had to be a manual point. It had to be a late prehistoric person with an old point that they had. Which, you know, stone, what does Cameron County not have?
Rocks.
Rocks, yes. They have them way down there. Or bedrocks, meters and meters of alluvial deposits. So yeah, so any stone tool, and pretty much when you do prehistoric sites down here, the only stone artifacts are finished tools that you find here. And then this is the cone, the nose, of the early 20th century artillery rounds that they were firing out here. The troops from Fort Brown. But based upon archaeology, we can draw new lines and adjust the lines out there, which we go out there, I'm going to show you, there's flags that kind of demark the initial battle lines. They should be pivoted about 7 to 10 degrees. But we'll eventually get to that, I guess. Now that the former chief of interpretation is gone, I might be able to get that done a little easier. Okay, so this is another period lithograph. You can see it's a hell of a lot more stylized. The U.S. Army were not in shakos on the battle. They were wearing the forage caps. The Mexican Army did have shakos. This is supposed to be a Rolando Palo. What else is wrong with this picture?
The same color on the roof.
Yeah, a little less
Vegetation is
like
wrong.
The greenery is the
The
best.
greenery and
Yeah.
vegetation is all.
It's like a scene from Deep in Mexico or something. Yeah, so the vegetation is totally off. Maybe they do got a palm tree, but it's not the right type of palm.
Right.
So, but anyway, yeah, these are artists renditions, usually years later, but from the period. Okay, this is the period map at Rosario de Palma. North, north is pointing down. This is upside down. North is facing down out there. But you see the historic road that connected Palo Alto. Okay, let me just tell you this. Palo Alto was an artillery dome. Neither side gave up the field, but the Americans fared a lot better for two reasons. One, they had the new strategy of flying artillery, where you bring the cannons in with horses. You have a team of horses that never leave the cannons, and they're able to rapidly move around the battlefield and fire. And that had a huge impact. Unfortunately, the person who developed this corps and brought it to the U.S. Army, Major Samuel Regal, died from wounds received here at the Battle of Palo Alto. And then they had two 18-pound cannons that weren't really meant for field use. They were taking them to the fort, but since they had it, Taylor had it. The Mexican Army had plenty of cannons, but they were driven by oxen. They were pretty much stayed stationary on their North battle lines until they really pivoted. But they're hard to move, and they weren't ready for an artillery duel. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army had 300 trains of supplies, so they had unlimited amount of ammunition out there. So the other side gave up the field battle. Like I said, the Mexican Army was really still entrenched in Napoleonic-style warfare. So was the U.S. customary. This war is Napoleonic-style war. It's a gentleman's war. All the officers come from aristocracy, and when the sun starts setting, you stop fighting because you're gentlemen. You let your opponent tend to his wounded and gather his dead, and you presume you'll resume the fight the next day on the same field. Eventually, General Mariano Alista decided to move his army before dawn, 6 miles down the road, to a place where the road crossed the Rosario de Palma, to use the natural ravine and the dense vegetation to negate the effects of the American artillery. It was a good decision. This battle was a lot more even as far as casualties. Intense hand-to-hand combat. The artillery didn't really play a role. The problem is, a good part of the Mexican infantry were holding their position over here, and they were never engaged by the U.S. Army, which the U.S. Army concentrated on the western flank. And after 2 hours of intense fighting, this was a lot more, casualties were a lot more even. Here at Palo Alto, they were 10 to 15 to 1. Over there, it's almost 1 for 1. And after 2 hours of intense fighting, able to penetrate the western line and capture the Mexican camp, sending the Mexican army into a disorganized retreat, and ending the siege of Fort Brown, which had been going on since May the 3rd.
What are all the dots?
This vegetation. That trees, that's showing it's a lot brushier. This is it. That's that loop. I don't know. I should probably turn that map upside down to show you. This is it. This would have been covered. This is where the Mexican army had lined up, all around here. This is the road coming in, and this is where they captured. We did archaeology on here when we were doing Palo Alto. We came over here. We were able to mow this and cover this in one day. We found one musket ball right there. We found some reenactor stuff up here where we had an encampment in '98 out there. In '67, there was a mass burial of Mexican soldiers found right here when they were digging out this reservoir when they were putting it in that neighborhood. That was done by some graduate students from the University of Texas. One would eventually be a professor of mine later on.
Zabaleta?
No.
No?
Mike Collins is one of them, but Hester is Tom Hester. He was a graduate student up there. And if you know Texas archaeology, you know the name. If you know Texas prehistoric archaeology, Tom Hester is a huge name. I'm lucky to have him as a mentor and all that. Okay, so here's where I put it right in there, this one. I didn't realize I had this. It would have made my talk a lot easier if I knew I had this slide coming up next. But anyway, so that's where it is. These soldiers didn't come in line. So we did the archaeology, we did the metal detectors, and we did find it. So the city of Brownsville got a grant, got some money. We hired contractor with PBSJ. We wanted to see, we know that landform in the 50s was a citrus orchard. Why are there no artifacts on there? You know, there's a citrus orchard, and then in the 60s it was made into a polo field. So we wanted to see the integrity of the landform. How much has that land been reworked? So we hired PBS&J to do shovel test and backhoe trenching. And there was some introduced soils to level it out, but a lot of it is intact and the same. You know, it's a little disturbed from, there is some like concrete irrigation for the citrus orchard, but is there the archaeology? There's no archaeology because they concentrated on the outside of that. But that said, even though this site didn't carry the heat of the battle, it is what is left, what is surviving on the battlefield. Important, we can't tell the story of the beginning of the U.S.-Mexican War without Rolando, Palo. It's important to us. Right now we're rebuilding the trail, but it is our gateway unit for the community to kind of get out here. You know, a lot of you haven't been out here. A lot of people in Brownsville don't get out here. They don't know, or it's too far or something. But this is the way we can, we have events here. Our main one we have is the Saturday after Veterans Day. We have the memorial illumination, where we light 8,000 illuminatios to honor the soldiers from both countries who fought in the campaign down here. It's nice and good. We start off with living history, like about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Then the volunteers and visitors light the illuminatios, and we leave them burning. You know, we have a camp, a living history camp set up, and y'all can talk to the living historians and all that. That's usually the Saturday after that. But it's a really nice event. Now we go to Fort Brown. I still got everybody excited, fun, move out. Fort Brown. The siege of Fort Brown was May 3rd to the 9th. So in March of 1846, Taylor arrived from Corpus. He had spent the winter in Corpus, and Mansfield, the engineer, designed this fort as a 6-star earthen fortification, and they started construction on it. Here's what it looks like in respect to Matamoros, the city, and the river. The river has changed its course. Of this little oxbow has been there. The river now currently goes down here and comes out over there. But that's what it looks like. This has the Mexican batteries, one in the woods there, and the fire out there. Unfortunately, most of the fort, actually, on April 25th, remember I talked about Codecitos earlier? April 25th, Codecitos, a scouting party of U.S. Dragoons was overtaken by a regiment of Mexican cavalry up there on April 25th. So the hostilities were really coming down. Meanwhile, you know, Taylor comes in March, and they're starting to construct this fort. Mexico is amassing the Army of the North. You know, Mexico, the act of war has already started because that happened when a foreign army came onto their soil, crossed through the oasis, and came into their land. So they're amassing the Army of the North. In late April, they sent General Arista to take over the command of the Army of the North after to replace Apulia, who Apulia is still around, and that also plays Apulia and Arista's role plays a role in here at Palo Alto, but that's a different story for sure. But anyway, so they started because April 25th. They're still moving forward. On May 1st, Taylor goes to Port Isabel to gather supplies to withstand a lengthy siege out there. He leaves 500 troops under the command of Major Jacob Brown. I was going to say Samuel Regal, Major Jacob Brown, and to finish construction of the fort and hold it at all costs until they can come back. May the 3rd, while Taylor's over there in Port Isabel, they say he rides, he can hear the sound of far off cannon fire. So the siege begins May the 3rd on there. Out there, this is the modern, I should know that is. Modern area of the land in there. Unfortunately, all that remains standing of the wall is right here. And this persisted up in the 1890s, right before, there's a 1934 aerial photograph that you can kind of see the outline of the fort still in place. I think when they dug this levee, they kind of removed the standing wall, except for this one. And the reason they left this part of it, because it has a cannon. In 1960, the commander from Fort Brown wanted to commemorate the 4 Mexican war sites. So they got cannon, which was customary at the time, and marked the battlefields, and they put it in the ground with the casket bell with a muzzle facing the sky to denote that a U.S. soldier gave his life in battle out there. That's the only one left in its original interment. Palo Alto stayed. Versailles didn't stay that long. You can tell when you go visit the cannon over here at the corner, it's very corroded at the back. It means it was in the ground a long time. At Versailles de la Palma, which we just moved into the battlefield at Versailles de la Palma, it's in a lot better shape. And that's because it was moved out of its original interment and made a roadside marker. And that cannon has moved around a lot, thanks to people wanting to declare that the battle was on their property or that. It finally, I think, is now in its last place at the parking lot by at the little development complex we have at Versailles de la Palma out there. But and then one of Cabecitos has also been moved in on a roadside marker. That's the one that lost the original permit. I think because that marker was there, when they built the levee and took these down, they didn't remove this, and it's this wall up to about right there. Yeah, that's NHL, that was designated NHL in the 1960s as well. Just close up of it. That, okay, if you didn't see earlier.
Is that the golf course there?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. This is a golf course. It
All right.
was an active golf, it's now abandoned golf course.
It's an abandoned golf course, that's right. Is that portion of it registered national?
National Historic Landmark, yeah, they have 3 sections of National Historic. We're actually have a nomination in to expand the boundary to include all this based upon the archaeology we've done here. And if you don't know, there's legislation in Congress, in the House, to expand the boundary of Palo Alto to include Fort Brown. IBWC, which has been divested himself of property in the area, is willing to transfer that property to us, but we can't take it until our boundaries expanded, or unless we have a presidential makes it a national monument. You have a question?
Where were the Buffalo Soldiers stationed at?
In Fort Brown? No, sorry. Okay. Fort Brown was an active military installation until World War II. There was 2 brief incidents where it was not manned, but let me see if I can get the pointer to work. Maybe not. I know there's a pointer. Oh, here it is. Oh, that's not. Okay, anyway, you see the Gateway Bridge?
Yes.
Right there? Okay, that's the corner of Fort Brown. It goes up and then up, all around here and back. And this was the river. This was a river up until like 1939. So the wooded area, all this, where the Fort Brown, all the fort, where the brick buildings are, that's where the main fort was. This was kind of left. It was an airstrip, a polo field. It wasn't highly used as the rest of the fort. The main body of the fort was up there around. There's actually a national cemetery that started during the Mexican War out in the center of that island. And the famous Resaca Club was there once.
That horseshoe
What
lake.
is that?
What, as just a little bar that was there.
Do they still,
What's that?
do they still call that horseshoe lake?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Fort Brown?
Yeah. It's Fort Brown. Texas Southmost College has been there for a long time, and now UTRGV has a campus out there. How many of y'all been to the campuses? It's worth to go. There are, after the Civil War, Sheridan started construction on brick structures out there. There's a hospital, played a role in the cure of yellow fever out here. It is nice. It is really beautiful campus, cool historic buildings around the fort. Unfortunately, a lot of the wooden structures have been lost due to time and neglect. And they're gone, the officers' row. Now they have a huge performing arts amphitheater where the officers' row used to be. But don't get me started on that. I'm about historic preservation. What was I saying earlier? It's hard to deal with that. The only thing that's permanent is change. So I like to freeze everything. All right. Is there another question? So yeah, so that's it. Just picture that. I think next one, here's the cannon right there, and it's at the end of the driving range. So yeah, there's getting a little better. In 2011, I partnered, just like I said, I do everything with partnerships, with National Park Service Midwest Archeological Center, Steve DeBoer, right here. For years, he's been putting on this archaeological perspective training, and it's using remote sensing equipment to look at archaeological sites. When we did this in 2011, this was the 21st time they put on. They do it annually, although I think Steve's retired just recently. And these are students and instructors. You see, we also involve some local students from UT Pan American, the archaeology, which I do my best to give students down here a chance to get experience. And so this is us working different types of equipment, running around the field. It's a pretty cool time. Bobby Lucio was managing the golf course at the time, and he was a very good partner for us. You know, right now that it's been abandoned, it's just not taken care of, and it's important that we do. We're trying to work with the city of Brownsville, who's applying for interim lease to administer this as a burning site or a storage site from IBWC until we can get the property. But there's a long way before that actually happens. We got to get an MOU in place, and that's always hard with three agencies. But anyway, this is the ground penetrating radar. It shoots radar down there and it bounces back. Okay, all these remote sensing techniques, they're based on, okay, you have an undisturbed surface that's been deposited by alluvial, it's intact and all that. These pick out the disturbances, which are cultural, man-made, man's the one who disturbs everything. So you see the anomalies or the disturbances in the natural ground. That's its radar waves. It bounces back at a certain time. They have I think this is a 250. They have very low, like 50 hertz, whatever. I'm not saying that right. So up to 400. And the lower the hertz, the deeper you go, but the less accurate. The higher, the shallower you go, but the more accurate picture you get. So you got this, we use middle of the road there. We thought this was going to be our main tool based upon previous experience, not here, but elsewhere. But it wasn't, just because the soils are different. Everywhere you go, the ground conditions are just different. And so dealing with this, it wasn't great. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it is useful, but it wasn't as good as the one tool that wasn't. This is a magnetometer. And it doesn't, because the Earth has magnetic fields out there, and when you dig or do something, it picks up those changes in the magnetic, it makes a change in the magnetic field, so that picks up that. And of course you do everything with a grid, and you project it out. You see those ropes, and there's little tapes here on the rope, at every meter or so you got to take a shot, and you put the grid out, and you get a map, and you see the big anomalies. You can't just put it down, because that's going to tell you nothing. That's Steve doing the commentary. And the important thing is you cannot have any metal on your body. You cannot have shoes with metal eyelids, and people make this like coins in your pocket, keys, nothing. That's why Steve dresses like that. He's not just casual. And then this is the electric resistivity. This is the one, it has a, you see that cord? It just says electric charges through the ground in there. And it makes, the difference when you dig something up and then. This is the dirt, this is the GPR. I should probably put what they are. This is the GPR, and you can kind of see, this isn't the best, it looks better on the computer screen. You can kind of see a point there, a point of that. And these dots over here represent the standing walls right there. And this is the what do you call that? Where you drive off of the big hill, yeah, whatever. This is the magnetometer. Okay, you see this? These are utility lines. A lot of these dots are, I said it's a magnetometer, so it's picking up the iron artifacts in the ground as well. But now you can see this little bit a little bit better. It shows up a little more. That's the wall, the footprint of the fort. But this is the electric resistivity right there. You can see it clearly. And just look, that's why it was good that we did this, because one time we did a feasibility study with just a ground penetrating radar, and we got some results. So if we would have spent a contract and just gone with a GPR, we would have not got nothing. We did this, it was a training, we got some free work, students got experience, and then we also, important to us here in the city, we brought professionals from around the country down here to see what we have. Because Brownsville has a history that's unique to itself, with the Mexican War sites, with a huge historic district, the architecture. We really have a resource down here. And with professional people like archaeologists, architects, other people in historic preservation, really, when they haven't been here before, are really amazed at what we have now. Anyway, I don't know why I said that. Boom. Okay, so I said that wasn't our main tool, that wasn't our primary tool we're gonna use. So that's why we kind of cut off over here, because that was our last, we weren't putting a lot of emphasis on that. But we later, thanks to HDR consultants who were doing a study for the mortar fence that came in 2007. They hired one of the instructors of the class. And these are like bomb proofs here, and that they're not only to make more sense. I mean, that's still very clear over there. But that's the interior of the fort, and these are structures in and around the fort wall there. Today, it does not look like that. You can go there in the parking lot, you'll get harassed by border patrol, you can go there alone. But, yeah, this, what's that?
Even in a group, you'll get harassed.
Yeah, but that's okay. As long as you aren't doing something illegal, you're okay. Okay, so anyway, so this is, it's all grass growing over. Last April, every year, we partner with the Texas Historical Commission. They get a grant from the Battlefield Trust, and we do Park Day. For years, for like 12 years, we did it out at Palmito Ranch, which is the last Civil War battle over here upon there. Last year, we wanted to give some attention to Fort Brown, especially since abandoned. We had a pretty good turnout. We had a group of Border Patrol explorers and some other UTRGVs, and we cleared the old golf path to the fort. Working, I got IBWC maintenance guy Joe Fritz to actually let me go back a bit. So I actually didn't show you it's over. Okay, that's a good picture. You see this? These trees are on the ruins, or the standing ruins. That's bad. One, it obscures the side of the ruins, but two, the roots are destroying the structural integrity of the earthen walls. So I got IBWC to come in with one of those big wood vultures and chop that down. So that's what we did at the park day, we cleared the path, and then we removed all the sticks, all the debris off of the ruins, so eventually we can start mowing it and all that already. And as you saw, I want to thank y'all for your attention, I hope you had a good time, I know I did. How about y'all? We'll get ready, go to the bathroom, get some water, and we'll go walk on the battlefield, and then we'll go fire a cannon.